The silence after battle was always the hardest part. Admiral Park Hyun-woo stood on the observation deck of the UES Incheon and looked out at the debris field that had once been the most powerful Vorthak fleet in their empire. Twisted metal drifted past the windows, pieces of ships that had carried thousands of soldiers just hours ago. Some of that debris came from human ships too. "Final casualty report, sir," Commander Kim said quietly as he approached. His uniform was stained with smoke and his face showed the exhaustion that came after 12 hours of continuous battle. Park took the data pad and read the numbers that would haunt his dreams. 7 human ships destroyed completely. The destroyers UES Ulsan and UES Pohang, the cruiser UES Cheongju, the battleship UES Jeonju, and 3 escort vessels. 12,047 human personnel killed in action. Another 8,000 wounded. "Captain Choi?" Park asked. "Killed when the Pohang rammed that Vorthak dreadnought. He saved the UES Busan and probably half the 3rd Squadron." Kim paused. "He died a hero, sir," Park nodded. Captain Choi Min-ho had been one of his best officers, a careful man who thought through every decision twice. In the end, he had given his life to protect others without hesitation. That was what humans did when it mattered, and the Altarians were still getting reports from the surface. Dr. Ahn estimates about 400,000 civilian casualties from the bombing. But we saved nearly 2 million people from the prison camps, 2 million lives. Park tried to hold on to that number when the weight of his losses threatened to crush him. 12,000 humans had died, but 2 million aliens would live because of their sacrifice. "Sir?" came a voice from behind them. Park turned to see Chief Engineer Bae Jun-seo approaching. The man looked like he hadn't slept in days, which was probably true. "Damage report on the fleet. How bad?" "Could be worse. The Incheon lost her forward shield array and 2 main gun turrets. The Seoul has engine damage that'll take a week to fix properly. Most of the other ships have minor hull breaches and system failures." Bae wiped grease from his hands with a dirty rag. "We can fight again if we have to, but we need a real shipyard for major repairs." "We'll make do with what we have," Park said. "How long before we can establish a proper relief operation?" "Already working on it, sir. The Altarians are incredibly organized for people who just survived an invasion. They've got refugee centers set up and supply distribution networks running. All they needed was someone to chase away the bullies." Down on New Haven's surface, the real work was just beginning. Dr. Ahn Soo-bin had set up field hospitals in 12 locations across the planet. Human medics worked alongside Altarian doctors to treat the wounded from both species. "Doctor," said her assistant, Lieutenant Park Min-young, "we've got 30 more Vorthak prisoners coming in. Most of them have injuries from the space battle." "Treat them the same as everyone else," Dr. Ahn said without looking up from the Altarian child she was examining. "Broken bones don't care what species you are." It was a philosophy that defined the human approach to the aftermath. They could have left the Vorthak prisoners to die. They could have taken revenge for the destruction of Altarian cities. Instead, they followed their own laws about treating prisoners of war, even when those prisoners came from a species that showed no such mercy. Commander Yoon Da-eun found herself serving as an unofficial ambassador between 3 different species. The Altarians wanted to understand why humans had risked everything for strangers. The Vorthak prisoners couldn't comprehend being treated with dignity after losing a battle. "Your species confuses me," said Admiral Korthax during one of their interviews. The former Vorthak commander sat in a detention cell aboard the UES Incheon, but it was a clean cell with proper food and medical care. "How so?" Yoon asked. "You fight like demons when you have to, but you treat defeated enemies like guests. You traveled across the galaxy to save people you'd never met. Your admiral risks his career to do what he thinks is right instead of following orders." Korthak shook his head. "In the Vorthak Empire, such behavior would be seen as weakness. Maybe that's why your empire will never understand the galaxy as well as you think you, do. Explain." Yoon thought for a moment about how to put it in terms the Vorthak could understand. "Your people believe that strength comes from taking what you want. Humans believe that real strength comes from protecting what you love. You see the difference?" Korthax was quiet for a long time. "What will happen to me now?" "You'll be tried for war crimes. The Altarians have a right to justice for what you did to their people. But you'll get a fair trial with legal representation. And then, that depends on what the court decides. But you'll live. Your crew will live. That's more mercy than you showed the people of New Haven." Meanwhile, the news of the battle was spreading across the galaxy faster than anyone expected. The first reports came from Vorthak ships that had escaped the battle, then from merchant vessels that had detected the massive energy signatures of the space battle. Within days, every government in known space was talking about the impossible human victory. On the Altarian homeworld, the Council of Elders held an emergency session to discuss what had happened at New Haven. 12 ships, Elder Morkana said in amazement. 12 human ships destroyed an entire Vorthak armada. 60 ships, Elder Velcorum corrected. But still, the Vorthak had over 200 vessels. This should have been impossible. Perhaps we've been thinking about military strength in the wrong way, suggested Elder Thexmira. The humans didn't win because they had bigger guns. They won because they trained harder, fought smarter, and cared more about the outcome. The discussion that followed would reshape Altarian foreign policy for generations. For the first time in their peaceful history, they began to consider that sometimes violence was necessary to protect innocence. Back on New Haven, Administrator Veltar stood in the ruins of his capital city and watched human engineers work alongside Altarian construction crews to rebuild what the Vorthak had destroyed. The cooperation was remarkable. Human efficiency combined with Altarian precision to create something better than either species could have managed alone. Administrator, said Morden as he approached with a communication pad, we're receiving hundreds of messages from other worlds, species we've never heard of, asking if the humans really did what the reports say they did. Veltar wasn't surprised. The galaxy was full of peaceful civilizations that lived in fear of aggressive neighbors. The Vorthak Empire was just one of many threats that smaller species faced every day. What should we tell them? The truth. That when we called for help, the humans came. That they fought harder than anyone thought possible. And that they did it for no reason except that it was the right thing to do. Sir, some of these messages are asking if the humans would help them too. Veltar looked out at the human ship still orbiting his world. Admiral Park had made it clear that the 7th Fleet would remain until New Haven was back on its feet. They weren't occupiers or conquerors. They were protectors who had appointed themselves to watch over people who couldn't protect themselves. I think, Veltar said slowly, that the galaxy is about to become a very different place. He was right. In government buildings across known space, leaders were having the same conversation. For centuries, the strong had preyed on the weak because no one was willing to stop them. The Vorthak, the Hegemony, the Ravager clans, all of them had built their power on the assumption that peaceful species would always be victims. Humanity had just proven that assumption wrong. Admiral Park received his orders from Earth Command 3 days after the battle. Officially, he was being recalled for unauthorized military action. Unofficially, the message from Fleet Admiral Kim Song-ho was much different. Hyunwoo, the entire Admiralty, is arguing about whether to court-martial you or give you a medal. The politicians are screaming about unauthorized wars, but the intelligence services are saying this is the best thing that's happened to human foreign policy in decades. Every peaceful species in the galaxy is suddenly very interested in talking to Earth. Park smiled as he read the message. Politics was something he'd never been good at. Fighting for people who needed help was something he understood completely. Sir, Commander Kim said as he entered the Admiral's quarters, we're receiving another distress call. A species called the Calamari. About 4 days from here, they're being attacked by something called the Iron Fang Pirates. Park looked out the window at New Haven, where human and Altarian workers continued rebuilding together. The planet would be fine. They had proven they could defend themselves, and they had allies now who would answer if they called for help again. Prep the fleet for departure, he said. Looks like we've got more work to do. The blue sky of New Haven was burning. Veltar pressed his 6-fingered hands against the observation deck window and watched the orbital defense platforms die one by one. Each explosion sent bright flashes across the planet's atmosphere. The Vorthak warships hung in space like black daggers against the stars. They had come without warning, without demands, without mercy. How many ships? Veltar asked his assistant Morden. 237, Administrator. Maybe more hiding behind the moon. Morden's voice shook. His blue skin had turned pale with fear. They destroyed our entire defense fleet in 20 minutes. Veltar closed his eyes. New Haven was a peaceful mining colony. They had no military beyond a few patrol ships and the orbital platforms. The platforms were now burning metal in space. 2.3 million Altarians lived on this world. Farmers, miners, teachers, children, none of them had ever heard anyone. "Keep broadcasting the distress signal," Veltar said. "Someone has to hear us." "Sir, we've been sending it for 127 days. No one has answered." Veltar knew this. Every government in the galaxy had received their calls for help. The Centaurian Republic said it was not their sector. The Vegan Confederacy claimed they were monitoring the situation. The Galactic Council had sent a formal letter expressing deep concern and nothing else. Outside, the first Vorthak bombardment began. The capital city of Haven's Rest had 3 million people. Veltar watched green energy beams slice through the defensive shields like they were made of paper. Buildings older than his grandfather turned to dust and fire. The communications center, the hospital, the schools where Altarian children learned about the peaceful galaxy they lived in. "Administrator," Morden shouted over the alarms. "Incoming transmission from the human monitoring station." Veltar spun around. Humans? He had heard of them but never met one. They were a young species from somewhere far away. What could they want? The hologram showed a human female in a dark blue uniform. Her skin was pale pink and her hair was black. Strange flat features, but her eyes looked kind. "New Haven Colony, this is Commander Lee So-Jin of Earth Intelligence Corps Station 47. We received your distress signal. I'm forwarding it to our military command right now." "Commander Lee," Veltar said, trying to keep hope out of his voice. "We appreciate any help, but we don't have much time. The Vorthak fleet is already bombing our cities." The human woman's face grew hard. "Vorthak? Those bastards." She said a word that the translator couldn't handle. "Sir, I'm breaking protocol here, but I'm sending your message directly to Admiral Park Hyunwoo of the 7th Fleet. If anyone can help you, it's him." "How far away is this fleet?" Veltar asked. 3 days at maximum speed. Maybe less if they push their engines. 3 days. Veltar looked out the window again. Haven's Rest was already half destroyed. "Commander, I don't think we have 3 days." "Then hold on for as long as you can," the human said. "Earth doesn't abandon people who call for help." The transmission ended. Veltar stared at the empty hologram. Earth doesn't abandon people who call for help. What a strange thing to say. Every other government had abandoned them without a second thought. "Sir," Morden said quietly, "the Vorthak are landing troops in Sector 7. Veltar nodded. He had seen Vorthak invasions before on the news feeds. They didn't kill everyone at once. First came the bombardment to break resistance, then ground troops to round up survivors. The strong ones became slaves in their factories. The weak ones were left to die. He opened a channel to all emergency frequencies. "This is Administrator Veltar of New Haven Colony. To all citizens, evacuate to the underground shelters immediately. Take only what you can carry. This is not a drill." Over the next 12 hours, Veltar watched his world die. The Vorthak ships took turns bombing different cities. They weren't trying to destroy everything at once. They wanted to cause terror, to make people run in panic so they could be captured more easily. The mining town of Blue Creek was hit at dawn. The fishing village of Coral Bay burned at noon. By evening, refugee streams clogged every road leading to the mountain shelters. Veltar moved his command center to an underground bunker beneath the capital. The concrete walls shook with each explosion above. Emergency lights cast strange shadows on the walls. His staff worked at portable computers trying to coordinate evacuations while the world ended above their heads. "Sir, we're getting reports from the surface," Morden said. "Vorthak dropships are landing in the city center. They're setting up processing camps." Veltar had seen those camps on other worlds. Huge metal cages where prisoners waited to be sorted. The healthy ones shipped off-world as slaves. The others shot and left in mass graves. "Any word from the human fleet?" "Nothing, sir." "I don't think they're coming." Veltar couldn't blame them. Why should they? Humans barely knew Altarians existed. They had their own people to protect. It made no sense to risk a war with the Vorthak Empire for strangers on the other side of the galaxy. But still, he kept hoping. By the second day, most of New Haven's major cities were in Vorthak hands. The aliens moved efficiently, setting up their equipment and herding prisoners with cold precision. They had done this many times before on many worlds. Veltar sent one last message on all frequencies. "This is New Haven Colony. If anyone receives this transmission, please remember us. We were a peaceful people. We never hurt anyone. We just wanted to live in peace and raise our children under blue skies. The Vorthak came and we couldn't stop them. We called for help, but no one came. Please, if you have the power to stop them from doing this to others, use it. Don't let them win. Don't let them turn the galaxy into a place where only the strong survive. He paused, looking around at his staff. Good people. Brave people. They had stayed at their posts even when the world burned above them. Thank you for listening. This is Administrator Veltar signing off. The transmission ended. In the silence that followed, they could hear Vorthak soldiers moving through the building above. Heavy boots on metal floors. Harsh voices speaking in their guttural language. Veltar sat back in his chair and closed his eyes. At least he had tried. At least someone somewhere would know what happened to New Haven. Outside the bunker, the blue sky had turned black with smoke. The Vorthak Empire had claimed another world. Another peaceful people had learned that the galaxy belonged to those willing to take it by force. But far away, in the deep darkness between stars, something was coming. Something fast and angry and absolutely determined to prove the galaxy wrong about who really owned it. Admiral Korthek stared at the tactical display aboard his flagship, the Vorthak Dreadnought Dark Conquest. The human ships hung in space at the edge of the system like tiny needles against the stars. 60 ships total. His fleet had 237 warships, including some of the most powerful vessels in the Vorthak Empire. What do we know about these humans? He asked his intelligence officer. Very little, Admiral. They're a young species from the Outer Rim. No significant military reputation. Our databases show they've been involved in a few minor conflicts, but nothing on this scale. Korthek nodded. Young species often thought they were stronger than they really were. The galaxy had a way of teaching them better. Show them what happens when someone challenges the Vorthak Empire. On the planet below, Veltar huddled in his underground bunker with the last few members of his staff. The concrete walls shook constantly from explosions above. Vorthak soldiers were still hunting for survivors in the ruins of the capital city. Administrator, Morden whispered. The humans are really here. I can see their ships on our sensors. Veltar looked at the display. 60 human ships against over 200 Vorthak warships. It was brave, but it was also hopeless. These humans had traveled across the galaxy to die for strangers. Part of him wished they hadn't come. At least then their deaths wouldn't be on his conscience. Sir, came another voice from the communication station. The human admiral is broadcasting on all frequencies. The voice that filled the bunker was calm and confident. Vorthak Fleet, this is Admiral Park Hyunwoo. You have exactly 5 minutes to begin withdrawing from this system. After that, we'll make you leave. The threat was so ridiculous that Morden almost laughed. 5 minutes? The human fleet could be destroyed in 5 minutes. Admiral Korthek thought the same thing. He opened a response channel. Human Admiral, you have courage but no wisdom. We have conquered 47 star systems. We have destroyed fleets 10 times larger than yours. Surrender now and we'll give you a quick death. Counteroffer, came the reply. You leave now and we won't have to embarrass you in front of your crews. Korthek had heard enough. All ships, attack formation. Destroy the human fleet. The Vorthak armada began moving toward the human ships. Massive battle cruisers led the charge, followed by squadrons of heavy cruisers and destroyers. It should have been like watching lions attack a flock of sheep. Instead, something impossible happened. The human ships moved, not just forward or backward, but in ways that made Korthek's tactical officer blink and check his sensors twice. The human vessels slid sideways through space, spinning and diving and climbing in patterns that seemed to ignore basic physics. Their formations flowed like water, each ship covering the others while maintaining perfect spacing. How are they doing that? The tactical officer asked. I don't know, Korthek admitted, but it doesn't matter. Numbers always win. The first exchange of fire proved him wrong. The human ships opened up with weapons that blazed like captured stars, brilliant white beams that cut through Vorthak shields like they weren't there. The leading Vorthak battlecruiser, the Bone Crusher, lost its forward shield array in the first 10 seconds of combat. But it was the human tactics that really shocked the Vorthak. Instead of forming a battle line like civilized species, the humans split into small groups that attacked from multiple directions at once. Their smaller ships swarmed around Vorthak vessels like angry insects, firing precise shots at weapon systems and engines. Admiral, the sensor operator called out. 3 human destroyers just took out the cruiser Iron Fist. They're targeting our engines specifically. Korthek watched in growing alarm as his fleet tried to respond to the human attack. The problem was that the humans were everywhere at once. Every time a Vorthak ship turned to face one group of attackers, Another group hit them from behind. On the human flagship, Admiral Park watched the battle unfold with satisfaction. The Vorthak were good fighters, but they were used to enemies who fought by the rules. Humans had never been very good at following rules when people's lives were at stake. "Commander Kim," he said to his tactical officer, "execute attack pattern 7. I want those heavy cruisers out of the fight." "Yes, sir." All squadrons attack pattern 7. The human fleet shifted again, moving in a complex dance that brought their heaviest ships to bear on the Vorthak cruiser squadron. The UES Incheon led the charge, its main cannon powering up with a sound like thunder. The weapon that emerged from the Incheon's bow was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen, a beam of pure energy that channeled the power of a small star. It struck the Vorthak heavy cruiser Skullbreaker dead center and went completely through it. The cruiser exploded in a ball of superheated plasma that lit up half the system. "Impossible," Cortex whispered. What kind of weapon was that? His question was answered when 5 more human battleships fired their main guns at once. The beams converged on another Vorthak cruiser, the Death's Hand, and turned it into glowing gas in less than 3 seconds. But the humans weren't just winning with superior firepower. Their pilots were doing things that seemed impossible. Commander Park Ji-won led her fighter squadron in an attack on a Vorthak destroyer, her pilots weaving between enemy fire like they could see the future. "How are they so fast?" A Vorthak pilot screamed over the radio before his ship exploded. The answer was simple, though the Vorthak didn't know it. Human reflexes, enhanced by cybernetic interfaces, allowed them to react 3 times faster than most alien species. To human pilots, Vorthak ships seemed to move in slow motion. Within 30 minutes, the Vorthak had lost over 40 ships. Admiral Cortex realized he was facing something he had never encountered before. An enemy that was not only willing to fight but actually better at it than his forces were. "All ships fall back to defensive formation," he ordered, but the humans didn't let them reorganize. The moment the Vorthak tried to retreat, human ships pressed the attack. Captain Nam Gi-young's battleship squadron used coordinated drone swarms to overwhelm Vorthak point defenses, then moved in for close-range kills. "Admiral," the communications officer called out, "we're receiving surrender requests from 7 of our ships." "Denied," Cortex snarled. "No Vorthak ship surrenders to aliens. Sir, the Dark Talon just lost its entire weapon array. They're requesting permission to withdraw." "I said denied." But even as Cortex gave the order, he knew the battle was lost. His fleet was being systematically destroyed by an enemy that shouldn't have been able to challenge them. These humans fought like they had been born for war, but with a precision and coordination that spoke of extensive training and superior technology. On New Haven's surface, Veltar and his staff watched the impossible battle unfold on their sensors. Vorthak ships were exploding one after another, while the human fleet seemed to take minimal damage. "Administrator," Morden said in amazement, "the humans are winning." "They're actually winning." Veltar could hardly believe it himself. The Vorthak Empire had conquered dozens of worlds. Their fleets had destroyed entire civilizations, and now 60 human ships were tearing them apart like paper. "Sir," the communications officer said, "I'm receiving a transmission from the human flagship. Put it through." The voice was calm and professional, like the speaker was discussing the weather instead of commanding the largest space battle in recent galactic history. "Administrator Veltar, this is Admiral Park. We've got the situation under control up here. How are things on the surface?" "Admiral, there are still thousands of Vorthak soldiers on the planet. They have most of our people in prison camps. Not for long. We're sending down Marines as soon as we finish cleaning up this fleet. Tell your people to stay in the shelters for a few more hours." "Admiral," Veltar said, his voice breaking with emotion. Why did you come? We're strangers to you." The pause lasted several seconds. When Admiral Park spoke again, his voice was gentle but firm. "Administrator, let me tell you something about humans. We believe that peaceful people deserve to live in peace. We believe that when someone calls for help, you answer. And we believe that bullies need to learn that the galaxy doesn't belong to them." Another Vorthak cruiser exploded in the distance, its death lighting up the planet's night sky. "We came because it was right, and because someone had to show the galaxy that the strong don't always win." Admiral Park Hyun-woo stood in the command center of the UES Incheon and read the message for the 3rd time. The holographic display showed him everything Lee So-jin had forwarded from New Haven Colony. desperate voices speaking in a language his computer barely recognized. Images of burning cities and alien warships hanging in space like black clouds. "What do we know about these Altarians?" he asked his tactical officer. Commander Kim Tae-yang pulled up files on his console. "Peaceful mining colony, sir. Population 2.3 million. They've never been involved in any conflicts. Their government is basically a bunch of farmers and engineers who got together to run a planet." "And the Vorthak?" "Different story entirely." Kim's face grew dark. "Militaristic empire. They've conquered 47 star systems in the last century. They don't negotiate, they don't take prisoners for long, and they don't leave survivors who might cause trouble later." Park nodded. He had heard of the Vorthak before, the kind of species that made the galaxy a darker place just by existing. "Sir," said Captain Choi Min-ho from the destroyer squadron, "with respect, this isn't our fight. We're 3 days from home at maximum speed. No one asked Earth to be the galaxy's police force." Park understood the captain's concerns. The 7th Fleet was humanity's most powerful naval force, but they were also very far from any support. 12 capital ships, 47 escort vessels, and 180,000 of Earth's finest sailors and marines. If something went wrong, no one could help them. "Commander Yoon Da-yoon," Park said to the woman standing near the diplomatic station. "Your opinion?" Yoon had been studying alien cultures for most of her career. She knew more about non-human psychology than almost anyone in the fleet. "Sir, the Altarians represent everything we claim to value. Peaceful cooperation, scientific advancement, taking care of their people. If we let them die when we could save them, what does that say about us?" "It says we're smart enough not to pick fights we don't have to win," Captain Choi replied. "No," Park said quietly. "It says we're the kind of people who only help others when it's convenient." He walked to the main display and looked at the tactical information. The Vorthak fleet was massive, over 200 ships including several of their heavy battle cruisers. On paper, it should be an easy victory for them. The 7th Fleet was outnumbered 4-1, but Park had been studying Vorthak tactics for years. They were used to fighting species that surrendered quickly or fought with old-fashioned weapons. They had never faced anyone who hit back as hard as humans could. "Chief Engineer Bae Jun-seo," he said into his communicator. "How fast can we get to the New Haven system?" "At maximum acceleration?" 72 hours, sir. "But I wouldn't recommend it. We'll be pushing every engine past safety limits. Half the crew will be sick from the acceleration and we'll arrive with partially depleted fuel reserves. And if we don't push the engines? 4 days, 18 hours. Much safer for the ships and crew." Park did the math in his head. In 4 days, the Altarians would be dead or enslaved. In 3 days, they might still have a chance. "All ships prepare for maximum acceleration," he announced on the fleet-wide channel. "Set course for New Haven Colony." "We're going to war, sir," Commander Kim said carefully. "Do we have authorization from Earth Command for military action?" Park looked around the command center. These people had followed him through 3 separate conflicts. They trusted his judgment. Sometimes being human means doing what's right regardless of orders. The next 3 days tested everyone aboard the 7th Fleet. The acceleration pushed every human body to its limits. In the medical bay, Dr. An Subin worked around the clock, treating crew members who couldn't handle the stress. The corridors of every ship filled with the sound of people being sick, but they kept going. Chief Engineer Bae performed miracles keeping the engines running. He barely slept, moving from ship to ship in maintenance shuttles to fix problems before they became disasters. When the engine on the destroyer UES Busan started overheating, he personally crawled inside the reactor housing to make repairs while it was still running. "Sir," he reported to Park on the 2nd day, "we're holding together, but just barely. If we have to fight when we arrive, I can't guarantee all our systems will work properly." "Do your best," Park told him. "That's all anyone can ask." On the 3rd day, they finally dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the New Haven system. What they saw made everyone angry. The Vorthak fleet hung around the planet like vultures around a corpse. Huge black ships with weapon ports glowing red. On the planet's surface, fires burned in dozens of cities. The orbital defense platforms were gone, blown to pieces and floating in space as scrap metal. "Sensors detect massive Vorthak ground forces," Commander Kim reported. "They've set up processing camps in at least 12 locations." "Sir, if those are what I think they are," Park said grimly. He had seen intelligence reports about Vorthak prisoner camps, places where civilized beings were sorted like cargo, the strong ones shipped off to slave factories. the weak ones killed and buried in mass graves. "Admiral," came a voice from the communications station. "We're receiving a transmission from the planet's surface. Audio only, very weak signal. Put it through." The voice that came through the speakers was tired and scared, but still determined. "This is Administrator Veltar of New Haven Colony. If anyone can hear this, the Vorthak have taken our world. Most of our people are dead or captured. We held out as long as we could. We're sorry we couldn't do better." Park opened a channel. "Administrator Veltar, this is Admiral Park Hyunwoo of the United Earth Space Navy. We received your distress call. Sorry we're late. Traffic was murder getting here." The silence that followed lasted for nearly 30 seconds. When Veltar spoke again, his voice was full of hope and disbelief. "Admiral Park, you came? You actually came? We said we would. Earth doesn't abandon people who call for help. But there are so many Vorthak ships, over 200. You'll be destroyed." Park looked around his command center. Every officer was watching him. These people had followed him across the galaxy to fight for strangers they had never met. "They deserve to know why, Administrator," he said. "We didn't come this far to turn around and go home. Hold tight, we're going to make some noise." He switched to the fleet channel. "All ships, battle stations, this is what we came here to do." The Vorthak had noticed them by now. Their massive fleet was turning to face the human ships. Admiral Korthex, the Vorthak commander, sent a message on all frequencies. "Unknown ships, you are in Vorthak space. Identify yourselves and state your business here." Commander Lee So-jin, now serving as communications officer, smiled as she opened a response channel.
"Vorthak Fleet, this is the United Earth Space Navy. Our business is protecting people who can't protect themselves."
"We formally demand that you withdraw from this system immediately." The response came quickly, harsh laughter and threats. The Vorthak had never heard of humans, but they weren't impressed. Another young species thinking they could challenge the Empire. Admiral Korthex sent his own message. "Humans, you have 30 minutes to leave this system or we will add your ships to our trophy collection. This world belongs to the Vorthak Empire now." Park stood up from his command chair. Around him, his officers waited for orders. Outside, the largest space battle in human history was about to begin. "Korthex," he said calmly, "let me explain something to you. We traveled 3 days at maximum speed to get here. We pushed our engines past safety limits. Half my crew is still recovering from acceleration sickness. We did all of this for people we had never met, on a world we had never seen, for no reason except that it was the right thing to do." He paused, looking at the tactical display showing the massive Vorthak fleet. "Do you really think we came this far just to leave when you told us to?" The space around New Haven had become a graveyard of burning metal and exploding ships. Admiral Korthex watched from his command deck as another squadron of his cruisers died under human fire. In 40 years of conquest, he had never seen anything like this. "Admiral, we've lost 60% of our fleet," his tactical officer reported. The young Vorthak's voice shook with fear. "Their weapons are cutting through our shields like they don't exist. Then we adapt." Korthex growled. "Order all remaining ships to focus fire on their flagship. Kill their admiral and the rest will fall apart." It was the kind of tactic that had worked against other species. Cut off the head and the body dies. But these were humans, and humans didn't fight like anyone else. The moment 50 Vorthak ships turned their weapons toward the UES Incheon, the entire human fleet responded. Every ship moved to protect their flagship, creating a wall of steel and fire that the Vorthak couldn't penetrate. "Impossible," Korthex whispered. "How do they coordinate so perfectly?" The answer was something the Vorthak couldn't understand. Human naval doctrine was based on trust, training, and the belief that every person in the fleet was worth protecting. When Admiral Park's ship was threatened, every captain in the 7th Fleet moved to defend it without being ordered. "Sir," Commander Kim said from the Incheon's tactical station, "the enemy fleet is concentrating on our position." "Let them come," Admiral Park replied calmly. "All ships formation Charlie 7. Time to show them what happens when you threaten Earth's Navy." The human fleet moved like a living thing, ships sliding into new positions with perfect precision. The UES Incheon took point, its massive hull bristling with weapons. Behind it, battleships and cruisers formed a cone of destruction that aimed directly at the heart of the Vorthak formation. "Fire," Admiral Park said quietly. What happened next made the previous battle look like a minor skirmish. The combined firepower of the human fleet lit up space like a newborn star. Beam weapons, missile salvos, and plasma cannons all fired at once. creating a wall of destruction that swept through the Vorthak ships. The first Vorthak battlecruiser to take the full force of the human attack simply vanished. One moment it was there, a kilometer-long ship of war that had conquered a dozen worlds. The next moment it was expanding gas and debris. By the void, Korthex breathed. What are these creatures? His question was answered when Captain Nam Gi-young's battleship squadron demonstrated another human innovation. Instead of fighting alone, they had trained their ships to work together like fingers on a hand. The UES Seoul, UES Daegu, and UES Gwangju moved in perfect formation, their weapons firing in sequence to overwhelm enemy defenses. The Vorthak heavy cruiser Blood Drinker found itself facing all three ships at once. Its shields held for exactly 4 seconds before collapsing. The ship's hull followed a moment later. "Admiral," the Vorthak sensor operator called out in panic. "Their small ships are everywhere. They're hitting our engines, our weapons, our life support. How are they so accurate?" The answer was simple but devastating. Human technology had advanced beyond what most of the galaxy thought possible. Their targeting computers could track dozens of targets simultaneously. Their weapons could hit a specific component on an enemy ship from thousands of kilometers away. But more than that, human crews trained constantly for exactly this kind of battle. Every gunner knew how to disable an enemy ship without destroying it. Every pilot could thread their fighter through enemy fire that would have killed any other species. Lieutenant Commander Park, Ji-won proved this point as she led her fighter squadron against a group of Vorthak destroyers. Her pilots moved like dancers, spinning and diving through space in patterns that seemed impossible. "Blue leader to all fighters," she said over the radio. "Target their weapon systems. Leave the engines alone. We want prisoners for questioning." Her fighters attacked with surgical precision. Laser bursts that took out gun turrets without damaging the hull. Missile strikes that disabled shield generators while leaving life support intact. In minutes, 3 Vorthak destroyers were floating helplessly in space. Their crews alive but unable to fight. "Surrender your ships and we'll treat you according to galactic law," Ji-won broadcast to the disabled vessels. The response was immediate. "This is Captain Vexmore of the destroyer Flesh Render. We surrender. Please don't kill us." It was the first time in Vorthak history that one of their ships had surrendered to an alien force. Admiral Korthex felt his empire crumbling around him. Not just his fleet, but everything the Vorthak represented. They were supposed to be the strongest, the most feared. The conquerors who took what they wanted and destroyed anyone who opposed them. These humans were proving that strength meant nothing without skill. That fear only worked against people who had something to lose. And that sometimes the conquerors met something they couldn't conquer. "All ships," he broadcast on the fleet channel. "Ramming speed. If we can't defeat them with weapons, we'll take them with us." It was a desperate move, but desperation was all he had left. 23 Vorthak ships turned toward the human fleet and accelerated to maximum speed. Their captains shut down life support and diverted all power to engines. If they were going to die, they would take some humans with them. The human response was swift and brutal. "Ramming attack detected," Commander Kim announced on the Inchin's bridge. "All ships are tracking and preparing to intercept." "Denied," Admiral Park said. "Let them come. But prepare the gravitic mines." The gravitic mines were another human innovation that the galaxy had never seen. Devices that could create artificial gravity wells in space, powerful enough to tear apart incoming ships. The 7th Fleet deployed them like a minefield between themselves and the charging Vorthak vessels. The first Vorthak ship to hit a gravitic mine simply came apart. The artificial gravity well stretched its hull until the metal snapped like a rubber band. The ship broke into 3 pieces, each spinning away into space. The others suffered similar fates. 23 ships began the ramming attack. 0 reached their targets. "Impossible," Korthex said for the 10th time that day. But it wasn't impossible. It was just human. On the planet below, the ground battle was going equally badly for the Vorthak. Human Marines had landed at 12 locations simultaneously. Their dropships protected by fighter cover that swept away any Vorthak aircraft that tried to interfere. Sergeant Major Oh Seung-ho led the assault on the largest prison camp. His Marines moved through the Vorthak defenses like ghosts, using stealth technology that made them nearly invisible. They struck fast and hard, taking out guard towers and communication centers before the enemy knew they were under attack. "All prisoners secure," he reported to the fleet. "We count approximately 50,000 Altarian civilians. They're scared but alive. Similar reports came in from other landing sites. The Vorthak ground forces, cut off from orbital support and facing an enemy they couldn't see coming, surrendered or fled. Within 6 hours, every prison camp on the planet was in human hands. Admiral Korthek stared at his tactical display. Of his original fleet of 237 ships, only 18 remained operational. The rest were destroyed, disabled, or had surrendered. His ground forces were scattered or captured. His reputation was in ruins. "Admiral," his communications officer said quietly, "the humans are broadcasting a message." The voice that came through the speakers was calm and professional. Admiral Park sounded like he was discussing a routine training exercise instead of the most decisive naval victory in recent galactic history. "Admiral Korthek, this is Admiral Park Hyun-woo. Your fleet is defeated and your ground forces have surrendered. I'm offering you the same terms I offered your crews. Surrender your remaining ships and we'll treat you according to galactic law." Korthek wanted to refuse. Every instinct told him to fight to the death rather than surrender to aliens. But he looked around his command deck at the young Vorthak officers who trusted him to bring them home alive. "What guarantees do I have?" he asked. "My word as an officer of the United Earth Space Navy. Your crews will be treated as prisoners of war. They'll be fed, given medical care, and returned to Vorthak space when this conflict is resolved. And me? You'll face trial for war crimes against the Altarian people. But you'll live." Korthek closed his eyes. In one day, these humans had destroyed everything he thought he knew about warfare. They fought harder than anyone he had ever faced, but they still offered mercy to defeated enemies. "I surrender," he said finally. "All Vorthak ships, stand down and prepare to be boarded." The Battle of New Haven was over. Humanity had announced itself to the galaxy in the most dramatic way possible. But for Admiral Park, watching Altarian civilians emerge from the ruins of their cities, the real victory was much simpler. They had kept their promise. They had answered the call for help. The Grand Hall of the Galactic Confederation gleamed with light from 1,000 different worlds. Ambassador Zithrael stood at the central podium, his blue skin shimmering under the soft glow of the chamber's bioluminescent ceiling. Around him, representatives from 47 different species listened with calm attention. Some had scales, others had fur, and a few existed as clouds of sentient gas contained in elegant crystalline vessels. They had gathered for their monthly assembly, where the greatest concern was usually trade disputes or cultural exchange programs. Zithrael raised his 3-fingered hand, and the murmuring stopped. His voice carried through the chamber with practiced ease. "My friends, my colleagues, my family across the stars. Today marks the 300th anniversary of the Great Peace. 300 years without a single act of war. 300 years without bloodshed between our peoples." Applause rippled through the chamber, expressed in dozens of different ways. Some clapped, others hummed in harmony, and a few released pleasant scents into the air. High Curator Mevla, a being made entirely of living crystal, chimed softly from her elevated seat. The sound meant approval in her language. "We have proven," Zithrael continued, "that intelligence leads to peace. That civilization means moving beyond the primitive urges of violence and conquest. We resolve our differences through words, through courts of arbitration, through understanding." In the human section of the chamber, a small delegation sat quietly. There were only 5 of them, led by Ambassador Patricia Reeves, a gray-haired woman with tired eyes. She listened without expression as Zithrael spoke. Next to her, Dr. James Okoye, a xenoanthropologist, took notes on his datapad. "Which brings us," Zithrael said, his tone shifting slightly, "to a matter of continued concern. The humans, our newest members who joined us 50 years ago, maintain what they call a defense fleet. They spend enormous resources building weapons and training soldiers for wars that will never come." Several species turned to look at the human delegation. Ambassador Reeves kept her face neutral. She had heard this speech before many times. "We understand," Zithrael said, trying to sound sympathetic, "that humanity comes from a difficult history. Your world knew much conflict. But here in the Confederation, such things are relics of a darker age. We must ask once again that humanity consider reducing its military expenditure. Those resources could feed billions, advance science, create art." Ambassador Reeves stood slowly. The chamber quieted. When she spoke, her voice was measured and polite. "The people of Earth thank the Confederation for its concern. However, our position remains unchanged. We maintain our fleet not out of aggression but out of caution. We hope never to use it, but we will keep it ready nonetheless. A Valorian counselor, tall and elegant with skin like polished copper, spoke up. But Ambassador Reeves, what do you fear? We have eliminated war. The galaxy is safe. The galaxy you know is safe, Dr. Okoye said quietly, earning a sharp glance from Reeves. He stood anyway. The galaxy is vast. There are regions we haven't explored, phenomena we don't understand. We simply believe in being prepared. Zithrael smiled, the gesture one he had learned from studying humans. And that is exactly the primitive thinking we must move beyond. Fear of the unknown. Preparation for violence that will never occur. This paranoia serves no one. The Council voted, as they had before, to formally request that humanity reduce its military spending. And as before, the humans politely declined. The matter was tabled for another month. After the session ended, Zithrael approached the human delegation. Despite his public criticism, he genuinely liked Ambassador Reeves. She was intelligent and thoughtful, even if her people were stubbornly backwards. No hard feelings, I hope, he said, extending his hand in the human custom. Reeves shook it firmly. None at all, Zithrael. You're doing what you think is right. So are we. May I ask you something in private? Zithrael glanced around, then lowered his voice. Do your people truly believe war might come again? After 300 years of peace? Reeves studied him for a long moment. My grandfather used to say something. The cost of freedom is eternal vigilance. We don't want war, Zithrael. We hate it more than you can imagine. But yes, we believe that peace must be protected, not just hoped for. Zithrael shook his head sadly. Then I hope, for all our sakes, that one day your people will evolve beyond such fears. Reeves smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. I hope we never have to prove we were right. Far away from the gleaming halls of the Confederation capital, in the deep darkness at the galaxy's edge, something stirred. Commander Velik of the scout ship Wandering Song studied his sensors with growing confusion. He was a krill, an insectoid species known for their patience and attention to detail. For 3 days he had been tracking an anomaly that made no sense. These readings are impossible, his science officer said. She was young, barely out of academy, and this was her first deep space assignment. Energy signatures that don't match any known stellar phenomenon. Movement patterns that suggest artificial origin. But there's nothing there when we scan directly. Velik clicked his mandibles, a gesture of thought. Send a detailed report to Confederation Command. Mark it as Priority 2. Priority 2 meant unusual but not urgent. Priority 1 was reserved for emergencies, and Velik had never sent a Priority 1 message in his 30 years of service. Message sent, his communications officer confirmed. Should we investigate closer? Velik considered. The Wandering Song was a civilian vessel with basic sensors and no weapons beyond meteor deflection lasers. But they were scientific explorers. Strange readings were exactly what they were meant to investigate. Take us in slowly, Velik ordered. Keep all sensors active. At the first sign of danger, we jump away. The ship moved forward, its gentle drives pushing it toward the source of the anomaly. The crew watched their screens with scientific curiosity rather than fear. They lived in the safest era of galactic history. What could possibly threaten them? The readings grew stronger. Energy patterns spiked across the spectrum. The science officer gasped as new data flooded her console. Commander, I'm picking up organic signatures. Massive ones. And they're moving. Before Velik could respond, space itself seemed to tear open. Something emerged from the darkness. Something that made his ancient evolutionary instincts scream. It was huge, organic, alive in a way that defied nature. The hull was made of what looked like chitin and bone, pulsing with bioluminescent veins. It didn't look built. It looked grown. Emergency jump, Velik shouted. Get us out of here now! The communications officer's voice cracked with panic. Sending Priority 1 distress. The transmission cut off mid-word. On the thing's hull, 1,000 eyes opened at once, all focused on the tiny scout ship. The Wandering Song tried to run, its jump drive charging desperately. But tendrils of living matter shot across space faster than thought, wrapping around the ship like a spider catching a fly. In the Confederation capital, Zithrael was having dinner with colleagues, laughing about the day's proceedings. Ambassador Reeves was aboard a transport heading back to the human diplomatic station. And in deep space, the Wandering Song was pulled into the massive creature's maw and consumed ship and crew without a trace. The last thing Velik saw was more of the creatures emerging from the dark. Dozens of them, hundreds. An armada of living nightmares all heading in one direction, toward the heart of the Confederation, toward the worlds that thought the age of war had ended forever. The emergency session was called at midnight, Confederation Standard Time. Zithrael rushed into the chamber still wearing his sleeping robes, his face tight with worry. Around him, representatives arrived in various states of dishevelment. High Curator Mevla's crystal surface flickered with agitated light patterns. Commander Thalsis stood at the central podium, his insectoid features unreadable, but his posture radiating tension. He held what was supposed to be a ceremonial position, Defense Coordinator of the Confederation. For 300 years it had been exactly that, ceremonial. Until now. 3 worlds, Thalsis said without preamble. Kepler 17, New Harmony, and Velshar Station. All went silent within 48 hours. No distress calls. No evacuation signals. Just silence. The chamber erupted in confused murmurs. Zithrael felt his stomach tighten. 3 worlds didn't just go silent. It was impossible. We sent investigation teams, Thalsis continued. They found nothing. Not destroyed worlds, empty worlds. Every living being gone. Buildings intact. Ships still in orbit. But no people. No animals, no plants. Nothing alive remained. A crystalline delegate chimed urgently. Disease? Some kind of plague? We considered that, Thallis said. But a plague doesn't take all life, every form of it, in perfect synchronization. And it doesn't do this. He activated the central display. Holographic images appeared showing cities on the 3 lost worlds. The buildings stood undamaged, but something was wrong. The surfaces were covered in a strange organic residue, like dried mucus or webbing. It coated everything in a thin layer. Dr. Okoye, present as part of the human delegation, stood abruptly. His face had gone pale. Commander Thals, do you have chemical analysis of that residue? Yes. Thalsu sent the data to Okoye's pad. Why, do you recognize it? Okoye's hands trembled as he read. He looked up at Ambassador Reeves, who had also gone very still. We need to access the Confederation Historical Archives immediately. Section Theta 9 records sealed 2,000 years ago. High Curator Mevla's chimes took on a warning tone. Those archives are restricted. They contain information deemed too disturbing for general knowledge. I know what they contain, Okoye said quietly. And if I'm right, we're all in terrible danger. Within the hour, the council gathered in the secure archives chamber. Ancient data crystals lined the walls, containing information from civilizations long gone. Okoye worked the interface with practiced efficiency, clearly having studied these systems before. The humans have been researching our ancient history since you joined, Thaus observed. Why? Because we learned long ago that those who forget history are doomed to repeat it, Ambassador Reeves said. Show them, James. Okoye brought up records from 2 millennia past. Images appeared of creatures that made the council gasp in horror. They looked similar to the organic ships in the scout ship's final transmission, the one Velik had managed to send before dying. They were called the Devourers, Okoye explained, a hive-mind entity that consumed entire civilizations. Not for territory or resources in the traditional sense. They harvested all biological matter, all life, to fuel their own growth and reproduction. I know these stories, Zithrael said, his voice shaking. Every child learns them as myths, cautionary tales about the old days. But the ancient civilizations destroyed the Devourers. The war lasted 100 years, but they won. They thought they won, Okoye corrected. The Devourers disappeared. The ancients assumed they were extinct. But what if they were just dormant? What if they were waiting? As if on cue, alarms began blaring throughout the chamber. Talsa's communicator erupted with frantic messages. His mandibles clicked rapidly as he listened. Another world. Tarsus Prime. We're receiving distress calls now. They say the sky is filled with organic ships. They're being attacked. Deploy defensive forces, Mevla commanded. Thalis looked at her helplessly. High Curator, we don't have defensive forces. We have patrol ships with mining equipment and cargo vessels. The last military warship was decommissioned 290 years ago. The reality crashed over the council like a cold wave. They had spent 3 centuries dismantling every weapon, every warship, every military installation. They had turned themselves into a civilization utterly incapable of defending itself. Ambassador Reeves stood. Commander Thalses, can you establish a communication channel with the Devourers? Perhaps they can be reasoned with. Thales worked quickly. Within minutes, a channel opened. What came through was not words or even thoughts in any recognizable form. It was hunger. Pure, vast, endless hunger that made everyone in the room feel sick. One of the younger delegates vomited. Others backed away from the speakers as if the feeling could reach through and touch them. The message was clear. The Devourers didn't want to talk. They wanted to feed. Over the next 3 days, 2 more worlds fell silent. Civilian ships that tried to defend their homes were swept aside like insects. Mining lasers and cargo tractor beams did nothing against the Devourer bioships. Refugees fled in every direction, clogging space lanes, overwhelming stations. The Confederation Council met in continuous session. They tried everything they could think of. Economic sanctions, which made no sense against creatures that didn't trade. Diplomatic pressure, which assumed the Devourers cared about galactic opinion. Strongly worded condemnations that echoed uselessly into the void. Thals reported each day with worse news. They're spreading, following predictable expansion patterns. At this rate, they'll reach the core worlds within 2 months, and we cannot stop them. We need weapons, a delegate said. We need soldiers. We need time to rebuild our defenses. Building a military fleet from nothing takes decades, Thals said flatly. We don't have decades. We have weeks. Zithrael looked across the chamber at Ambassador Reeves. She met his gaze steadily. The question hung unspoken between them. The humans, Zithrael said finally, his pride crumbling. You have warships. You have weapons. You've been preparing for this. Reeves stood slowly. Not for this specifically. But yes, we're prepared for war. We're asking for your help, High Curator Mevla said, her crystalline voice barely audible. We're asking you to fight for us. To kill for us? The chamber fell silent. Everyone understood the weight of what they were asking. For 300 years, they had lectured humanity on their barbarism, their paranoia, their primitive attachment to violence, and now they needed that violence to survive. Ambassador Reeves looked at Dr. Okoye, who nodded slightly. She took a breath. I need to contact Earth Command. The fleet is stationed at Outpost Sanctuary, 47 light years from here. We'll need authorization from the President and Parliament. How long? Thals asked. For authorization? A few hours. For the fleet to arrive? She paused. 3 days. The Valorian counselor who had questioned humanity's military spending looked confused. But that's impossible. Standard FTL drive takes weeks to cross that distance. Reeves smiled, but it was a warrior's smile, cold and sharp. We don't use standard FTL drives on our warships, counselor. We use military-grade jump drives. Much faster, much more dangerous, much more expensive. The kind of technology you asked us to stop developing. 3 days later, space above the Confederation capital rippled and tore. One by one, 13 massive warships emerged from jump space in perfect formation. They were nothing like the elegant curves of Confederation vessels. They were angular, brutal, covered in armor plating and weapon ports. The largest ship, the UESS Retribution, took position at the fleet center. On its bridge, Captain Sarah Chen sat in her command chair watching the Confederation capital grow larger on the view screen. Her face was calm, but her hands gripped the armrest tightly. Send a message to the Confederation Council, she said. Humanity has arrived. Tell them the fleet is ready. In the council chamber, Zithrael watched the human warships on the display. He felt a mixture of relief and shame. They had been saved by the very violence they had condemned. And he wondered, not for the first time, if humanity had been right all along. Captain Sarah Chen stood in the observation deck of the Retribution, looking out at the gathered Confederation representatives. They stared at her ship with expressions ranging from hope to horror. She had expected this. To species that had lived in peace for 3 centuries, a true warship must look like a monster. And the Retribution was definitely a monster. 500 meters of reinforced titanium ceramic composite armor, railguns that could punch through a small moon, missile batteries loaded with nuclear warheads, point defense lasers that could track and destroy 1,000 targets simultaneously, and a crew of 800 trained warriors who drilled constantly for combat they hoped would never come. Until now. Zithrael was among the observers, standing with Commander Thalses and several other council members. He approached Chen cautiously, as if afraid the ship itself might attack him. Captain Chen, he said, his voice uncertain. Thank you for coming. We are grateful, Chen nodded. She was a woman in her mid-40s with short, dark hair and eyes that had seen too much. Save your thanks until we've actually helped, Ambassador. Right now we need information. Tell me everything about these devourers. They moved to the briefing room, where holographic displays showed the current tactical situation. It was worse than Chen had expected. 7 worlds lost completely. Dozens of stations evacuated. The Devourer fleet was spreading like a virus through Confederation space. They don't seem to follow our understanding of physics, Thales explained. Their ships are organic living things. They heal damage. They adapt to attacks. They don't need fuel or supplies in any conventional sense. But they can be killed, Dr. Okoye said, joining the group. He had come aboard with the Confederation delegation. The ancient races defeated them before. They're tough but not invincible. Lieutenant Commander Akari Tanaka, Chen's tactical officer, studied the data with professional interest. She was younger than Chen, sharp-featured and intense. Captain, I recommend we observe one of their ships in action before engagement. We need to understand how they fight. Agreed, Chen said. Commander Thales, are there any active battles we can reach quickly? The colony on Reshitar sent a distress call 20 minutes ago, Thales said. They have perhaps 6 hours before the Devourers arrive. Set course, Chen ordered. Maximum combat speed. And get me Admiral Webb on secure channel. The Retribution and 5 escort frigates jumped to the Reshitar system. They arrived to find a pathetic defense. Cargo ships trying to slow the Devourers. Civilian vessels attempting to evacuate millions of colonists. And bearing down on them, 3 massive Devourer bioships, each the size of a small city. Zithriel watched from the observation deck, unable to look away. The Devourer ships were nightmares made real. They pulsed with unnatural life, covered in what looked like eyes and mouths and things that defied description. Tentacles hundreds of meters long reached out, grabbing cargo ships and pulling them into grinding maws. Those ships, he whispered. They're eating everything. Now you understand, Chen said quietly, standing beside him. This isn't a war about territory or ideology. It's about survival. Yours and theirs. And only one side can win. She touched her comm badge. All ships, battle stations. Tanaka, initiate attack pattern Delta 7. Let's see what these things are made of. The Retribution moved forward with surprising grace for something so large. The escort frigates spread into formation, creating overlapping fields of fire, and then at 3,000 kilometers Chen gave the order. Fire. The railguns spoke first. Tungsten rounds accelerated to a fraction of light speed. Invisible until they impacted. The nearest Devourer ship shuddered as rounds punched through its organic hull. Strange fluids leaked into space, freezing instantly. But the ship didn't die. Even as Zithrael watched, the wounds began to close. The hull rippled and reformed, healing the damage within seconds. Adaptive regeneration, Tanaka reported. Impressive. Captain, recommend switching to thermal weapons. Agreed. All ships, fire missiles, pattern Omega. Dozens of missiles streaked from the human ships. These weren't conventional explosives. As they neared the Devourer, they detonated in sequence, creating a wave of plasma heat that turned space itself into fire. The Devourer ship's healing couldn't keep up with that. Its outer layers burned away and it let out a sound that made everyone aboard the Retribution clutch their heads in pain. It's screaming. Zithriel gasped. It's alive and it's screaming. Yes, Chen said, her face grim. War is never pretty, Ambassador. But it's them or us. The damaged Devourer tried to retreat, but the human frigates pursued, their lasers cutting into its wounded sections. Within minutes, the massive creature stopped moving, its bioluminescent veins going dark. It was dead. The other 2 Devourers changed tactics immediately. They split up trying to flank the human formation. But Chen had expected this. She had studied every scrap of ancient data about these creatures. She knew they were intelligent, adaptive, dangerous. Tanaka, implement Plan Beta 4. Show them what happens when they try to surround us. The Retribution's engines flared, and it spun in space, bringing all its weapons to bear on one Devourer, while the frigates handled the other. It was a dance, violent and precise, humanity's skill in warfare honed over centuries of practice. The Confederation observers watched in awe as the human ships moved with perfect coordination, each covering the other's weaknesses, each strike calculated for maximum effect. The second Devourer died in a nuclear fireball. The third, seeing its companions destroyed, tried to flee. Chen let it go. Let it run, she said. Let it tell the others what happened here. The evacuation ships cheered. The Confederation delegates looked at Chen with new respect and new fear. Commander Thals clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. You've done this before, he said. Not against devourers, but you've fought wars. Real wars. Humanity's history is full of wars, Dr. Okoye said sadly. Against each other, usually. We've had centuries to perfect the art of killing. It's not something we're proud of, but it is something we're good at. Over the next week, the human fleet engaged the Devourers 17 times. They won every engagement. Word spread through the Confederation that hope existed, but the cost was becoming clear. The Devourers adapted with each battle, learning from their losses. They started using new tactics, creating diversions, attacking supply lines, and intelligence reports brought terrible news. The main Devourer fleet was massing at the edge of explored space. Not dozens of ships, thousands. Admiral Marcus Webb arrived on the Retribution to coordinate the defense. He was an older man, gray-haired and scarred, with the look of someone who had seen too many friends die. He gathered the Confederation military leaders, such as they were, in the briefing room. We can't win a defensive war, Webb said bluntly. There are too many of them. They'll overwhelm us eventually through sheer numbers. Then what do you suggest? Mevla asked. Her crystal surface had lost its usual luster, dimmed by stress and fear. Offensive operations, Webb said. We take the fight to them. We hit their staging areas, disrupt their coordination, make them react to us instead of the other way around. The Confederation leaders looked shocked. Attack them? Zithrael said. In their own territory? It's the only way, Chen said. Defense is passive. It gives them all the advantages, but we're good at offense. We're very good at it. Thals has studied the tactical map. To do this, we would need to train Confederation forces in your methods. Our people don't know how to fight. Then we teach them, Webb said. Starting now. We have perhaps 3 weeks before the main Devourer fleet reaches the core worlds. That's not much time, but it's what we have. The training began immediately. Human soldiers taught Confederation citizens how to use weapons, how to think tactically, how to fight and kill and survive. It was hard for species that had known only peace. Some couldn't do it, breaking down under the stress. But others learned quickly, driven by the need to protect their families. A young Valorian named Shaltir became one of the best students. She had lost her entire family when her homeworld fell. She approached Chen one day during training exercises. Why do you do this? Shaltir asked. You could have stayed safe. This isn't your war. Chen looked at her for a long moment. It became our war the moment we joined the Confederation. When you make a commitment to stand with others, you keep it. That's what being human means. At least that's what it's supposed to mean. In his quarters, Zithrael recorded a message to the Confederation archives. I was wrong, he said quietly. We were all wrong. We thought evolution meant leaving violence behind. But perhaps true evolution is knowing when violence is necessary and being strong enough to use it in defense of those who cannot defend themselves. The humans don't love war, but they understand it. And right now, that understanding is all that stands between us and extinction. The 3 weeks passed quickly. The combined fleet, human warships surrounded by Confederation vessels retrofitted with what weapons they could carry, waited at the edge of the core systems. And then, like a dark tide, the Devourer Armada appeared. Chen looked at the tactical display showing thousands of enemy contacts and felt the old familiar fear before battle. But she pushed it down, buried it under layers of training and discipline. All ships, she broadcasted. This is Captain Chen. Today we fight not just for the Confederation, but for... The battle lasted 3 days without pause. Space became a graveyard of ships, both allied and enemy. The Devourer fleet was massive, but the combined forces fought with desperate courage. Human tactics mixed with Confederation innovation created strategies neither side could have achieved alone. On the second day, the fleet fought in the Veil Nebula, a region of dense gas and cosmic dust. Admiral Webb saw an opportunity and seized it. He ordered the human ships to lure a large Devourer formation deep into the nebula's thickest regions. They can't see through this soup any better than we can, Webb explained to Thals, but we have better sensors, and we know how to fight blind. The trap worked perfectly. Devourer ships stumbled through the nebula, separated from their hive coordination. Human frigates struck from concealment, firing and disappearing back into the cosmic fog. Confederation ships, crewed by newly trained warriors, followed the patterns they had learned, supporting the human vessels with covering fire. But the Devourers learned quickly, adapting even faster than expected. They released smaller organisms, living sensors that spread through the nebula like a net. The ambush advantages disappeared. Ships that had been hunters became hunted. The Confederation cruiser Harmony's Dream, retrofitted with human weapons but still crewed primarily by civilians turned soldiers, found itself surrounded. Its captain, a crystalline named Velmarsh, broadcast a final message. "Tell my family I fought well. Tell them the peace was worth protecting." The Harmony's Dream rammed itself into the largest Devourer ship, its makeshift nuclear reactor overloading on impact. The explosion consumed both vessels and cleared a path for refugee ships to escape. Zithrael watched from the command ship, his hands shaking. He had known Velmarsh for 40 years. They had shared meals, discussed philosophy, laughed together. Now his friend was gone, atomized in an instant of violence. "This is the price," Dr. Okoye said quietly, standing beside him. "This is what we tried to tell you. War isn't glorious. It's sacrifice. It's losing people you love to protect people you've never met." The third day brought the hardest fighting. A Devourer breakthrough force reached the refugee convoy heading away from the front lines. Human escort ships moved to intercept, outnumbered 5-1. Among them was the destroyer Defiance, commanded by Captain Miguel Torres. Ensign Marcus Lee, barely 22 years old, manned the weapon station aboard the Defiance. He was scared, exhausted, and determined. In his pocket, he carried a photo of a Valorian family he had befriended during the evacuation of Tarsus Prime. They were in the convoy somewhere. "Trying to reach safety, Captain," the tactical officer reported. "The Devourers are breaking through. They're heading for Convoy Section 7. Torres didn't hesitate. "All power to engines. We're going to block them." The Defiance accelerated, putting itself between the Devourer ships and the helpless refugees. Its weapons fired continuously, tearing into enemy hulls. But there were too many. The Devourers swarmed around the destroyer, their organic weapons ripping through shields and armor. "Hull breach on decks 3-5, someone reported. The ship shuddered as something massive impacted it. "Sir, they're boarding us," Lee said, his voice tight with fear. Through the internal cameras, they could see Devourer organisms flooding through the breached sections. They looked like nightmares, all teeth and claws and hunger. "Seal the bridge," Torres ordered. "Everyone grab a weapon. If they want this ship, they'll have to pry it from our dead hands." The bridge crew, 15 men and women from Earth, made their stand. They had trained for this, hoped it would never happen, and now faced it with the courage of those who choose to stand rather than run. Lee thought of the Valorian family, hoped they made it to safety, and fired his sidearm at the creatures tearing through the bridge door. The Defiance died hard, taking 4 Devourer ships with it. By the time reinforcements arrived, there were no survivors. But the convoy escaped. Thousands of civilians lived because 15 humans chose to die. Captain Chen received the report while coordinating another engagement. She read it twice, her face carefully blank, then set it aside. There would be time to grieve later. Now there were more battles to fight. But Shaltir, the young Valorian training with the human Marines, heard about the Defiance. She learned that Ensign Lee had saved the convoy section carrying her people, the survivors from her world. She found Dr. Okoye in the medical bay helping treat wounded. "Why?" she asked, tears streaming down her copper-colored face. "Why did they do it? They could have run. They could have saved themselves." Okoye looked tired, older than his years. "Because that's what soldiers do, Shaltir. They put themselves between danger and those who can't fight. Lee knew your people were in that convoy. He made a choice." "I don't understand humans," she said. "You're capable of such violence, but also such sacrifice. How can both exist in the same species?" "They exist in all species," Okoye said gently. "You just forgot because you didn't need to remember. But now you're remembering. You fought yesterday, didn't you?" "Fought well, I heard," she nodded. "I killed 3 Devourer organisms. I felt sick after. But I would do it again to protect others. Then you understand more than you think." The battles continued, each one costly, each one necessary. The combined fleet adapted and learned. Drykon, a reptilian engineer from the Confederation, worked alongside human technicians to modify ship systems. He began to understand the philosophy behind human military design. "Your ships aren't elegant," he said to one of the engineers. They're brutal, functional, with redundancy built into every system. The engineer, a woman named Kim Park, nodded. Pretty ships die when hit. Ugly ships keep fighting. We learned that the hard way centuries ago. We forgot so much, Drakon said. We thought forgetting made us better. But some knowledge should never be lost. Intelligence reports confirmed what everyone feared. The main devourer hive nexus, the central intelligence coordinating the entire invasion, had been located. It was aboard a massive bioship 3 times the size of anything they had encountered before. Positioned at the edge of the system, Admiral Webb called his command staff together, including Chen and the senior Confederation officers. If we take out that hive nexus, we disrupt their coordination. The individual ships will still be dangerous, but they'll be confused, unorganized. It's a suicide mission, Thal said flatly. That ship is surrounded by thousands of defenders. Not if we create a diversion, Chen said, studying the tactical map. Most of their fleet is engaged with our main forces. If we could pull more of them away, a small strike team might get through. We'd need to make them think we're attacking something vital, Webb said. Something they'd commit forces to defend. Mevla's crystal form flickered with urgent light. The Confederation homeworld is in this system. If they believed it was under serious attack, they would have to respond, Webb finished. He looked at Chen. You're thinking what I'm thinking. Chen nodded slowly. We make a run at the homeworld with the main fleet. All-out assault, everything we have. They pull forces from the hive nexus to defend. Meanwhile, a strike team uses the chaos to infiltrate. It's risky, Zithrael said. If the strike team fails, we've committed our entire fleet to a diversionary attack. If we do nothing, Webb said, we lose anyway. This war has taught me that the Confederation produces brave warriors when needed. Now we need to trust them. The decision was made. Chen volunteered to lead the strike team personally. Webb refused. I need you commanding the retribution for the main assault, he said. This mission requires someone who can think creatively, adapt instantly, and lead a mixed team of humans and Confederation forces. He looked directly at Zithrael. Ambassador, you know your people better than any of us. You understand how they think, how they move. I want you on this mission. Zithrael stood in shocked silence. Him? A diplomat who had spent his life arguing against violence, leading a military strike? But he thought of Velmarsh sacrificing himself for others, of Ensign Lee dying to save strangers, of all the soldiers, human and Confederation alike, who had given everything. I'll do it, he said. Tell me what you need. The plan was set in motion. The combined fleet would initiate the Prometheus Protocol, a desperate all-or-nothing assault on the Confederation homeworld's orbital space, drawing devourer forces away from the hive nexus. Meanwhile, Zithrael and a strike team of 20 volunteers, human and alien together, would infiltrate the hive nexus and destroy it from within. As the fleet prepared for battle, Chen found Zithrael in the armory, awkwardly fitting himself with combat armor designed for humans. I never wanted to wear this, he said quietly. Never wanted to hold a weapon? I know, Chen said, but you're doing it anyway. That's what courage is, Ambassador. Doing what's necessary even when it terrifies you. She helped him adjust the armor properly. The team is good. They'll watch your back. Trust them, trust yourself, and remember what you're fighting for. Peace, Zithrael said. Strange how we must wage war to protect it. Chen smiled sadly. That's the human condition. Maybe now it's the Confederation condition too. The fleet began its attack run and the final desperate gambit commenced. The main fleet struck the Confederation homeworld's orbit like a hammer. Captain Chen watched from the Retribution's bridge as thousands of ships, human and Confederation together, engaged the Devourer forces in the most desperate battle yet. Explosions lit up space like deadly fireworks. Ships died every second, both sides taking horrific casualties. They're taking the bait, Lieutenant Tanaka reported. Devourer ships are breaking off from the hive nexus. They're committing everything to defend their position here. Good, Chen said, though her face showed the cost. Another Confederation cruiser died on the view screen, its crew of newly trained warriors going down fighting. Keep the pressure on. Make them believe this is our real target. Far from the main battle, Zithrael's strike team approached the massive hive nexus in a captured devourer organism. The human technical specialist, Sergeant Rodriguez, had managed to convince the small bioship that they were part of the hive. It was disgusting sitting inside a living creature that smelled of decay and alien biology, but it worked. The team consisted of 20 volunteers, 10 humans, including Dr. Okoye, who insisted on coming despite his civilian status, 10 Confederation members, including Shaltir, the young Valorian warrior, and Drakon, the engineer. They carried enough explosives to crack a small moon, all focused on one goal: reach the Hive Nexus core and destroy it. "We're passing through their outer perimeter," Rodriguez said, his hands working the organic controls with visible disgust. "So far they think we're one of them." Zithrael checked his weapon for the 10th time. His hands had stopped shaking somewhere during the approach. Terror had given way to a strange calm, the acceptance that came with knowing you might not survive. "Ambassador," Okoye said quietly, "if we don't make it, I want you to know it's been an honor serving alongside you." "The honor is mine," Zithrael replied. "You humans taught us that strength isn't the same as cruelty, and that peace requires guardians." They penetrated deeper into the Hive Nexus. The bioship was impossibly vast inside, a maze of organic corridors pulsing with alien life. The team moved quickly, following Drakon, who had studied the structural scans. "The core should be 3 kilometers ahead," he whispered. "That's where the Central Intelligence resides." They encountered their first patrol after 2 kilometers. Devourer organisms, smaller than the bioships but still deadly, sensed something wrong. The team opened fire. In the narrow corridors there was no room for tactics, just brutal close-quarters combat. Shaltir fought like a demon, her copper skin splattered with alien blood. A devourer organism lunged at her. She killed it with 3 precise shots, exactly as the human Marines had taught her. No hesitation, no mercy, just survival. They lost 2 people in that corridor, a human corporal and a crystalline soldier named Felwyn, both torn apart by devourer claws before their teammates could save them. The team pushed forward, leaving their dead behind because stopping meant everyone died. The corridor opened into a massive chamber. And there, pulsing with sickly bioluminescence, was the core. It was beautiful and horrible at once. A vast neural network of living tissue and alien thought. Billions of neurons firing in patterns that coordinated the entire Devourer fleet. "Plant the charges," Zithrael ordered, sounding more confident than he felt. "We have 10 minutes before they realize we're here." The team spread out, placing explosive charges at structural weak points Drakon identified. The work went quickly, practiced hands moving with efficiency born of desperate training. Then Okoye stopped. He was staring at a section of the core where images seemed to flicker, broadcast from the neural tissue itself. "Wait," he said. "Everyone, look at this." The images showed worlds dying, consumed by the Devourers. But they also showed something else. A dying region of space, stars going supernova in a cascading chain reaction. The Devourers fleeing that cosmic catastrophe, desperate, starving, searching for any source of biological matter to survive. "They're refugees," Okoye said, his voice filled with horror and understanding. "They're not evil. They're running from their own apocalypse. They're just trying to survive." Zithrael felt his world tilt. All this death, all this sacrifice, and the enemy was just as desperate as they were. "But they're still killing us," he said. "They're consuming entire civilizations." "Because they don't know any other way," Okoye said. "They're a hive mind evolved to consume. They probably don't even understand that other species are truly sentient." Rodriguez looked at the charges. "We have 6 minutes before these blow. If we're going to change the plan, now's the time." The team looked at Zithrael. Somehow, the diplomat who had never wanted to be a soldier had become their commander. The decision was his. He thought about Velmarsh dying for peace, about Ensign Lee sacrificing himself for strangers, about all the dead on both sides, victims of a cosmic tragedy neither truly understood. "Okoye," he said, "can you communicate with it? Can you make it understand?" "Maybe," Okoye said. "The neural patterns are complex, but there's definitely intelligence here. If I can access the core directly, establish a mental bridge." "Do it," Zithrael ordered. "We don't have much time." Okoye approached the core, placing his hands on the pulsing tissue. The team watched tensely, weapons ready. If this went wrong, they would all die here. Okoye's eyes went wide, then closed. His body went rigid as his mind touched something vast and alien and hungry. He gasped. And when he spoke, his voice was layered with something else, something that echoed with the voice of billions. "We hunger, always hunger. The stars die.
We die.
Must feed, we know," Zithrael said, stepping forward. "But you don't have to kill us." There are other ways. Uninhabited systems. Resources we can share. We can help you. The presence in Okoye's mind recoiled, confused. The concept of help was foreign to creatures who had only ever known consuming or being consumed. Zithrael continued, speaking quickly. You're intelligent. You can learn. We've mapped thousands of systems rich with biological matter but no sentient life. We can guide you there. You can feed without killing anyone. Why? Would you help? Because that's what civilized species do, Zithrael said. We find solutions that let everyone survive. It's harder than fighting, but it's better. The hive mind processed this, and in that moment the battle above the homeworld changed. Devour ships began breaking off, pulling back. The coordination that had made them so deadly was faltering, as the hive nexus struggled with a completely new concept. On the Retribution's bridge, Chen watched in confusion as the enemy fleet withdrew. What's happening? Are they retreating? Captain, we're receiving a transmission, the communications officer said. It's from Ambassador Zithrael's team. They're saying, stand down? They're negotiating? Chen's mouth fell open. A negotiation. In the middle of the greatest battle in Confederation history, someone was negotiating. In the Hive Nexus core, Okoye maintained the mental bridge while Drakon worked frantically at his data pad. I'm sending star maps, the engineer said. Systems rich with primitive life, no sentient species. Enough to feed 100 devourer fleets, the presence considered, felt the truth in the offer, understood perhaps for the first time that not every species was prey. That some could be something else, partners, helpers, friends, Except, we'll go to these systems. We'll not consume sentient life. And if you're attacked? Zithrael asked. If someone threatens you? We defend. But we do not hunt. It wasn't a perfect solution. The devourers would still consume living matter, just not sentient species. They would still be dangerous if provoked. But it was a solution that didn't require the extinction of either side. Okoye collapsed as the mental bridge broke. Rodriguez caught him, checking his vital signs. He's alive. Exhausted but alive. Disarm the charges, Zithrael ordered. We're done here. The war ended not with a final battle but with an agreement. The Devourer fleet withdrew to the uninhabited systems. Guided by Confederation nav beacons, they would feed, grow, heal their wounded, and they would remember the species that chose to help rather than exterminate. But the cost had been terrible. 7 worlds lost, millions dead, hundreds of ships destroyed. The Confederation capital held a memorial service that lasted 3 days, honoring the fallen from every species. Captain Chen stood in the human section of the memorial garden, looking at the names carved in stone. So many names. The entire crew of the Defiance. Ensign Marcus Lee, 22 years old, who died protecting strangers. Hundreds of others who had volunteered to fight a war that wasn't theirs. Shaltir found her there. The young Valorian warrior moved differently now, with the careful precision of someone who had seen combat. Captain Chen, she said quietly, I wanted to thank you for everything. We did what needed doing, Chen said. Nothing more. No, Shaltir said. You did more. You could have destroyed the Devourers completely, but you gave them a chance. That's what makes you different. You know how to fight, but you also know when to stop. Chen smiled sadly. We learned that lesson the hard way, Shaltir. Hopefully you won't have to. Months passed. The Confederation rebuilt, but it rebuilt differently. They created the Joint Defense Force, a combined military organization training under human veterans. Species that had never held weapons,